Hello, everybody. Drasco here from 10knorm.com, where my main focus is to help guide heart-centered entrepreneurs under 10K months to transcend all of the blind spots that are keeping them from thinking, feeling, acting, and authentically marketing so they can normalize their own versions of 10K months. And on today's episode, we have a real talk segment where I bring in a heart-centered entrepreneur on their way towards their 10K norm, and we have some real talk about what's currently their biggest challenge towards their 10K norm. And in that conversation, we're going to explore who they are, why they do what they do, and then live on the call, I get to help them get out of their own way on a challenge that they're currently experiencing towards their 10K norm. And for today's guest, we have Nkem, who describes herself as a human goddess hybrid, sensationally journeying her way through life, which I love as like an intro to somebody. So I'm happy to dive into that piece. She's also a writer, a writing coach, an intuitive writing workshop facilitator, has her own podcast, and is fascinated by all things language, self, and human relationships. So right on par with regards to what we explore here at 10K Norm. And basically her ongoing goal in life is just to help people help themselves, right? So I love the empowerment bit. So Kev, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jessica. Thanks for having me. I'm doing really okay. I'm not gonna lie. I know before we started recording, I said I was doing okay, so I don't want to say I'm doing really good. A lot of what I do and how I am is just about being authentic and honest. So that comes down to also how I say I'm doing for the day. So I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's no more authentic way than not giving a typical answer to the question, how you do it, right? The expectation goes, yeah, I'm doing good, regardless of how I'm actually doing. So
Yeah.
that I think underlines completely the authenticity piece. So in that, why don't you give us more of an insight into the intro that I shared, which is just what was on the description, and
Mhm.
what authentically you feel like you are and bring to the world and to your client work.
Yeah, very interesting. Because on my own podcast, I ask people who they are, how they want to describe themselves, and it's so interesting what you get back. But over the past several months, a couple of years, I've been trying to think about who I am outside of just a professional arena, because basically our whole lives we're kind of conditioned to identify, especially if you're coming from like North America, let's say, you're basically conditioned to be a working somebody and like have that identity. Actually, it's not just North America, it's all around the world. And I should know that because I've traveled all around the world and I see it happening. And that's all well and good, except for when what you're doing for your work, your job, or your career, when it doesn't align with who you feel like you are inside. That's when the problems come. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people sit. So when I describe myself now, it is a person just trying to sensationally journey through life. And that means like experience all that I can experience. And some days, like today, are kind of in the lull, it's kind of the ebb and flow of life. And I made it a mission to myself to experience what I can experience, whether it's good or bad or like super, like intense either way, or whether it's just kind of calm, and just be present with those experiences. And that for me is sensationally journeying through life. How it relates to the work, and I'm trying to, so if you can think of a different word besides work or job or career, let me know, because I'm trying to think of different ways to describe how I connect with people, without saying how I connect with people and other people not realizing that I'm talking about work. I just want to kind of shift the paradigm with the people that I surround myself with, so we don't always talk about work and think about it as labor and, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do, even when there's a lot of things on my plate regarding the way that I connect with people. I still don't want it to feel like I have to do this labor, because I created it for myself.
So
No one is telling me to do that.
what's coming in? I don't want to cut you off, but what came to me as soon as you kind of brought the question back to me, because I think it's completely valid, right? Like
Yeah.
when typical language becomes typical, we lose the onus to like think for ourselves and like what's
Right.
actually present. So I
Right.
100% agree with that sentiment. But what came to me is said, okay, like what do you do for work?
Yeah.
It's how do you express what you do for others?
I like that. How do you express what you do for others? I like that. I like that a lot, especially because what I do, I do work for others. So there's a couple different things that how I spend my time. One, it kind of all started sometime last year in June. I created a website called wellspringwords.love, where I host the narratives, the storytelling, the writing of women of color, specifically for us to have a platform just for ourselves. And it is political in the sense that it is kind of inclusive for women of color and exclusionary to other people, but it's not meant to be solely exclusive. It's meant to uplift and amplify and empower women of color. So that's kind of like the umbrella, Wellspring Words. And then underneath that, that's where I started the podcast. Wellspring Words, the podcast, that's what it's called. Because the idea behind Wellspring Words is that for me personally, I'm a writer. I love to talk. I love to engage. I'm very curious. A lot of Gemini energy going on there, even though I'm not a Gemini sun, moon, or a sun or anything like that. But sometimes I feel like I'm going to, if I don't write down what I'm thinking right this moment, that I'm going to lose out on it. But it's not true. I have an abundance of words. I have a wellspring of words, of thoughts, of experiences within me that I can express at any moment. So that's why I decided to create Wellspring Words. And then the podcast is the same thing, because whether it's written or spoken, we're still using these thoughts, these words, these experiences to create the narratives of our lives that we want to share with people. And so that's kind of also one of the reasons behind Wellspring Words, is for people to share their own stories and create their own stories and understand that they have power over how they live their lives and their own trajectory, and what kind of things come into their life and what kind of things leave their life. It's not only based on the external world. So yeah, that's part of it. And then, well, as a person doing everything for this for this project, this business's brand, I had to kind of separate my time. I couldn't start everything at once. So first started the website, then came the podcast, and then I started hosting writing workshops, and specifically intuitive writing, creative storytelling, which have been so interesting, because you can come to the workshops as someone who's like a full-time writer, someone who's been writing for a while, someone who's just starting, someone who doesn't even consider themselves a writer, but just wants to become more creative or wants to understand themselves, or simply just wants to do something with their time. And I think it's really kind of like productive, but also you learn about yourself. You get a chance to meet other people and do some group creation and also some solo creation, and walk away feeling like you produced something, but also you enjoyed the process of it. So for me, it's kind of all encompassing that way. And that pretty much makes up the way that I work with people individually and in groups, alongside the writing coaching that I've been doing for several years now, because I've been a writing teacher for a long time. Yeah, I know it's not super, here's one little nugget that I can give you, but there's a lot of things that I do across the board. They all kind of condense into this human relationship. Let's talk about how we're living. Let's write about how we're living. Let's express ourselves. Let's learn about ourselves. That's my area.
I mean, there's so much there that not only we can dive deeper into, but that I think is very interesting to even how we started the conversation, which is the sentiment of authenticity, right? And to me, everything that you described, the part that weaves it all together is this semblance of what's real to me, right? Like what's the expressed semblance of my authenticity, like whether that is words and getting the words that actually reflect what's going on, whether it's answering, a typical question with the reality of it, not the normal, typical, expected response, or if it's I want to express in my podcast and in the way that I show up in the world for the people that I want to matter to, right? Like what are the real stories behind what's actually happening? To me, that sentiment comes up as the weaving kind of connection between all of them. So I'm not surprised that it's like, oh, I have, not say a hard time, but it's just like, if I talk about one thing, it doesn't encompass everything that I do. That to me all makes sense, because we can't all be tied down to like the answer to one simple question. It's not a test, just a question type of deal, right? So just having that reflected back to you, like, how does that land for you?
Feels good. It feels really good. And every time, well, for those listening and for you too, because we basically just met, I'm in Mexico City now, but I was in Abu Dhabi for a couple of years. And then I moved to New York. Well, I moved back to New York for a month, and then I moved to Mexico, and I've been kind of moving around Mexico slowly, because I don't have any timeline. So I'm just moving around slowly. And each time I meet people, which is almost every day I meet somebody new, they're asking me what I do with my time. Okay, they ask me what do I do for work. I'm just translating it. What do I do with my time? and I have to explain what I do each time, and each time it kind of becomes refined. So at this point, it feels quite refined, what I've mentioned to you, and I feel comfortable in the way that I've said it. So having it reflected back to me, it's pretty shiny.
Awesome. I love that. And just to kind of bring that back to, the themes that we tend to explore here. So one of the common ones is like, how do I authentically market? Right. 'Cause for any heart-centered entrepreneur that wants to move towards 10K norm, there is the personal work that we have to go through to find our own authenticity. But once we kind of hit on it, then there is the next step, which is now, how do I authentically begin to matter to the people that need me most? And oftentimes, and you can relate this back to your writing, because I think there is an overlap, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But when you begin to go out and authentically market your, whether it's your writing or you're talking or you're doing video, the goal is to essentially meet people where they're at. Like, there are people that need me, that I need to matter to, but in order to matter to them, I have to meet them where they're at through the lens of my own authenticity. That doesn't always mean talking to where you are, but it means talking to where they are through your authentic experience, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, or a combination thereof. So when you do your workshops, do you often find something like that comes up or no?
What specifically? Like when I'm marketing for the workshops or when I'm actually conducting the workshops?
Well, both. I mean, which one resonates more for you?
I mean, I guess I can speak on both. When it comes to marketing the workshops, when it comes to marketing anything for Wellspring Words, it's really interesting because it's a space that is not that I think the reality and the society that we live in wouldn't consider it necessary. Like a what do they call people during COVID? Essential work. People wouldn't consider it essential work, but I consider it essential work because it is getting down to the bare bones of your essence. That's what the work that I do is talking about. Whether somebody is sharing their piece on Wellspring Words and they're reflecting their lived experience through their writing, or I'm speaking with them, we're talking about these really important topics, or I'm hosting a workshop and we are invited to, not that people have to, but we're invited to bring our authentic selves and our essential selves to the table. So when it comes to marketing about that, the two don't mix. Like the word marketing and all the vibration that it holds and all of the background of what it represents does not mix with your pure essence as a human, as a spirit living in this human dimension. So it's difficult. But what I find works the best for me is when I'm living that. I am being like that representation of what I hope for people to experience when they come into community and communication with me. And that seems to garner the most interaction from people. And I usually just use social media. I mean, it's difficult because I doing everything myself. I have a lot of talents and skills and interests, but being someone who's like super adept at social media and doing this and that, and it's kind of a lot. So I just try to do the best that I can in terms of marketing and try to make it as authentic as possible, because I'm not trying to sell anything to anybody that makes it feel like they have to buy their way into understanding themselves. No. And anytime I see something like that across the internet, I put my phone down because I cannot but still can believe how things become so easily industrialized and easily like marketed and commercialized and profitable, but we're talking about the essential self. So for me, I always have to come back to my why when I'm doing the marketing and things like that. Although I know there's space to grow. I mean, maybe the way I'm speaking sounds like it's convicted. It's just one of the ways that I speak, but I know there's space to grow and I'm really, really open for that. Now, when it comes to the workshops themselves, maybe you can rephrase your question to so I can address the workshops in this regard.
Okay, so it's not that I'm avoiding your question. There was a few things that stood out for me in your answer about the marketing piece that I would love further clarification on. So number one, so you had mentioned that, okay, so the vibration of like marketing and vibration of finding the essence of what I do and expressing that through writing don't necessarily mix. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the vibration of marketing, which, well, what that means to me is like marketing in the way that I've seen it, in the way that I've studied it, in the way that it works in life is for me about deceit. It doesn't have to be, but many times it is. And so when there's marketing that's pure, it's hard to differentiate. Is this real? Am I getting what I'm supposed to be getting here? Or is this just another way to sell me something that you have already made me believe that I need when I really don't need it? And so, and so when I'm guiding people to do their own heart-centered work with trying to understand who they are, or if they have an understanding about who they are, trying to express that in more authentic ways, I don't want to sell to people. I don't want to make people feel like they're empty and they need to come to me so I can fill them up with something and they need to pay for that. You have everything you need. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean about the different vibrations and how they don't always mix. And so that's one of the tensions with this kind of work. It's not a bad thing. It's just something that's part of the tension of being a human being, right? Like we have these tensions every time, every day, every moment. We have to make decisions on how we're going to do things. And this is one of the tensions of this kind of business.
Got it. And your writing workshops, that they're called writing workshops, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, like they're writing workshops. Sometimes it just depends on the theme. So if they're intuitive writing and creative storytelling workshops, they're still writing workshops at the end. Writing is the modality that we're using. Yeah.
Got it. So if what you do is help people find and then express who they truly are, is that actually encapsulated in the term writing workshop?
No, it's not, because it's not always finding and expressing who you truly are. And the workshops that I do, they have their own themes. Like some of them are actually journeying to your most authentic self. One of them was called Journeying to Your True Self or Journeying to Your Authentic Self. And then another one was about confessional writing. And so they have their own themes and their own titles, but the way that I'm working with these writers or these guests, these participants, is through intuitive writing and creative storytelling. And as I'm doing that, I'm breaking down what we normally think of as creativity or creation and who we think gets access to that creation or intuition or storytelling based on our own positionalities in life. So yeah, like it doesn't necessarily, the name doesn't always necessarily encompass this idea of people finding themselves and expressing it, because sometimes I go in with that intention to help people, like guide people to understanding who they are and expressing that, but the group needs something different or the individual needs something different. So I just try to be as flexible as possible. Like you're saying, meet people where they are in the marketing and also when the sessions start.
Got it. So the reason I brought that up and why I thought it was interesting is the narrative that seems to dominate um, your idea of marketing, okay, is one where I have to be extremely careful to not be in deceit, to not sell people what they need, to not do a bait and switch, and
Mm-hmm.
all of things that fundamentally I completely agree with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yet when I talk about what I do, right, you had mentioned not something that's deceiving, but something that to me, at least how I interpret it and heard it, was very diluted from what you actually do. Because upon like reading about you and hearing that you do, intuitive writing workshops, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't interpret that as fundamentally, whether it's the confession theme or whatever, diving deep into who is the individual and how are they expressing themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your modality and the vehicle you do that happens to be writing, but the work you're actually delivering is a lot deeper. Yet how you're marketing it, i.e., gaining attention to it, talking about it, positioning it, is diluted in terms of what the individual actually get. So how does all of that resonate? And if it doesn't, by all means let me know, but just kind of curiosity, that's what I want to reflect back.
Sure. I don't think it's diluted. I think maybe my description of it probably didn't match um, what maybe your expectation based on the words, you know, because the marketing that I do is it's very clear. If someone is going to join a workshop or become involved in any of the projects for Wellspring Words, they know exactly what it is because it's very clear. All the information is there. They know what they're getting. Yeah, that's
Perfect.
yeah. But I can understand that there needs to be a match. There needs to be a match in the way that I'm representing what I'm doing.
Yeah,
For
and
sure.
that's kind of where I was getting at it and why I was asking the questions. Because yeah, I mean, if you're getting the right people in there, that's obviously solid. This was more about the kind of even taking it back to the beginning of our conversation, right? People have an expectation when I ask them, you know, how are you doing? Normally we typically answer it this way. So there's a set of expectations there. I want to go against that. Authentically, I'm present with how I'm doing today. I'm going to express that, even if it goes against a social norm. That actually tells me more about who you are in the first 3 seconds of talking to you than whatever other description I could have written or read about you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of just trying to see whether something like that may have also been happening with regards to when you are going out describing your work. Because I'm like, your work's really impactful. Like somebody who answers, how am I doing, really authentically, and then dives deep into like, you know, I want to make sure I express the full essence of who I am as opposed to just give you a canned answer. Like I know they're going to take that into their workshops and expect and guide people to do the same thing. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, is there an element where I'm doing, you know, the wordsmithing a disservice
Mm.
by just calling it a writing workshop, right?
Right, right,
For
right.
somebody
I
like
understand what you're
myself
saying.
that doesn't know what you or what you do or is not really in your world, right? Like I default to like, how do I write better?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what you do is like so much more depth, so much like it's just deeper and more valuable to the participant. You know, that's kind of what I meant by the dilution, right? Like, am I owning what I truly do for people and expressing it with that ownership to the best of my ability, to my most authentic self, right? Because
Mm.
oftentimes that is what happens when part-time entrepreneurs are working towards their 10K norm. It's like I know this like comes easily to me. I know I'm kind of good at it, but like, is it really like worth what I think it could be worth? Is it really worth it like that to the other person? You're prejudging it, right? You're not letting like you're
Other
not fully
people make
owning
that.
it. Exactly, right? You're not fully owning it and then putting it out there so that reality can give you the feedback and then you can see whether or not you're right. But when we prejudge it or we dim it, then it's not really in its fullest essence and we can't really gauge it. So how does that piece land for you?
It makes sense. It makes sense what you're saying. I don't think that I dilute what I do. So that doesn't resonate with me. However, my background in terms of my education and everything is in fashion business. And I'm the kind of person that if I don't like what I'm doing, if I don't like where I am, I move. I don't sit and complain about it. That's just me. I make moves. So when I wasn't happy in the fashion industry anymore, I decided I'll try nonprofit business development. Did that, didn't work. Went back to the fashion industry because New York City was expensive, had to pay this rent. Didn't work. I said, I'm out of here. I'm not staying in this industry. I'm not staying in the city just to be here, just for the sake of being here. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to do what I wanted to do for a long time, which was teach English overseas. And I went to Korea and I did that for a year. And while I was there, I got an opportunity to work in Abu Dhabi teaching writing in the university. And then I did that. So there's been a lot of movement in my own career, but the through line has always been communication, writing, teaching people how to write. Because even as I was working in the fashion industry and going to school for fashion business, I was always a writing consultant throughout the time since 2012. So that never stopped. No matter what job I did or no matter where I moved, it was always the same: education and writing and communicating with people and connecting people with themselves and with other people. So when it comes to now making this my full-time priority in terms of how I'm connecting with the world and how I'm giving all of this energy that I have, um, in a world that asks us to put credentials behind everything, it's difficult. And I think that difficulty at this moment, because it's such a transitionary time for me, at this moment, that difficulty is probably coming across sometimes in the way that I express it or in the way that I talk about it. But like I mentioned earlier, the more people that I meet and have to express it to, like this conversation now, it's making it easier for me to refine what I'm saying and say it more succinctly and X, Y, and Z, all those things. But thank you for bringing to light this thing, that this phenomena that people go through, especially those who have expertise in areas that no one accredited you for. You just have a way and it works, and people verify that it works. It's like an embodied experience, not just something that's theoretical. And paradigm shifting is happening within me and around me too, because if I'm going to live in that space and really own it and make space for others to live in a way that's authentic, and not just authentic like, oh, I'm doing horribly today, but let me not tell you I'm doing great, which is, I'm not really doing horribly, but authentic and like, this is what authentically comes naturally to me. And I want to express that with the world. And sure, Harvard doesn't have a degree for it, but this is here I am. That's embodied. And if people can trust that, they know that they can do the same thing as well with whatever their gifts are. But yeah, I think it is, you're right. It's something that a lot of us go through. I mean, another word for it is imposter syndrome, right? And attaching a value to that is where it becomes even more tricky as an individual who is used to a system that already attaches a value for you and you don't have to even try, or you don't, or if you try, you might fail, that kind of rhetoric. So here's who I am.
Love it for so many levels. And before I respond to it, what I would invite you to do is take that whole response and where you said they or other people or us.
Oh my gosh, I do that all the time.
With I.
I do that all the time. I've been starting to catch myself doing that. And it's this way of me intellectualizing vulnerability, which is one of my things that I'm working through, because I work in the space of vulnerability, of understanding that this world is inherently uncertain and we're working through that. We're living through that. We're just journeying through all of that. But when it comes to me actually being vulnerable, it can be difficult. And that's often the plight of the space holder, of the seer, of the, the intuitor, of the guide, where it becomes difficult to actually surrender and say I, and put the vibration in the I rather than the we or the they or the people. And anyway, thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I told you before the recording, usually I'm the party pooper because this is what it's about. And I agree with you. The reason it is easy to see in others, and why oftentimes we coach the things we're have gone through or potentially been going through, is because like when you can, like, if you can spot it, you got it. Right? So the we explanations, the other people, you, them, they, are explanations of, like you said, the intellectualization of that is really just a projection of ourselves.
Truly.
Right? If we're constantly projecting, then technically everything we see is also a reflection. Right? So in our clients, and why I firmly believe in coaching, is that even I think if you're doing coaching correctly, you're also coaching yourself while coaching the other. Right? Everything's a projection, and then therefore you need to interpret it or internalize it as a reflection. So in that, given that you recognize that you clearly have a good amount of self-awareness, where do you see your biggest obstacles now as far as your 10K norm?
I think the biggest space for closing the gap, I'm just being very mindful of my words and not to call it an obstacle. But you mentioned this idea of closing the gap earlier. I don't remember if we had already started recording or if it was before, and I really like the visual of that. But I'm just starting out. I'm really just starting out from something that was a passion project, still is a passion project, to making it the work that I do. Oh, I said work. We should have like a jar, right? That's just for me anyway. Yeah. And I think that's the beginning. This transition period is one of the reasons why I was so attracted to your invitation to come on this podcast was because it does require a mental, energetic, like lifestyle change, leveling up. It requires a complete shift in the way that I operate in the world in order to really believe that 10K norm is possible for me, 10K norm plus, or whatever is possible for me, no matter what kind of history I had in terms of work and career and education and all that stuff. But this is my trajectory that I see for myself that is totally possible and plausible, and that's what I want to go for. So the biggest space to close the gap is really just getting started with something and staying consistent, being really consistent about the work that I do.
Okay, so then what I'm hearing is a few different things from not just your answer, but the whole conversation. So there is one aspect of maybe fully owning and fully expressing that ownership in terms of what I actually do for people. And that can come in the form of, charging the right amount, doing that consistently, etc. There is the belief aspect, right? So essentially, do I trust myself enough to be consistent with the things that are in front of me to actually create my own 10K norm? Okay. And then it seems like there is the actual tactical component of like, okay, well, how do I do and what do I do? So would that feel accurate to you or no?
Seems pretty accurate.
Okay. And out of those, which one seems like the most relevant to you right now?
All of them.
Okay.
All of them, especially today where I sort of feel overwhelmed with the responsibilities that I've given to myself. And sometimes with that kind of overwhelm, I don't necessarily question so deeply, is it all worth it? But I do question, like, are the right people getting these messages, or are the right people getting access to these opportunities? And that I probably need a deeper skill set in some areas to make sure that that's happening. So yeah, all of it is relevant. All of
Okay.
it is relevant. And
So
when I'm moving around like this, it makes it a little bit more difficult too, to be like on the go and not just being in one place and creating a physical community in one particular area.
okay. So just elaborate on the second last part that you said. So there was a sentiment of overwhelm and then some responsibilities to yourself and people, and then a missing skill set. So can you get more specific with that piece?
Overwhelm, I mean, there's like things that, and they're not necessarily things that need to get done right now, but there are things that need to get done because if I will continue being consistent in the way that I have been for the past year, then I need to continue operating in the way that I have for the past year to some degree, which means that if I have a podcast episode to put out on the weekend and I'm traveling this weekend, that means I need to edit now and prep it so that way when I'm gone, all I need to do is post that it's there, right? And not have to wait to do the work on the day that I need to post it. So that means that the work needs to be done now. And sometimes when I'm in the process of actually editing the podcast and doing that work, I'm tired. Or I want to chill, and I don't believe in working myself to the bone anymore because I do that often. And especially when I'm really passionate about something, I go in and I just forget that the day even exists, but I don't want to live that way because it's not healthy and it's not necessary. It's really not necessary to do that. So I try to honor when I'm working through something and I just feel like really tired and I'm starting to get the aches and I'm starting to feel like, because I don't want to feel that way in the work that I created to bring people together. I don't want to feel that way with the work that I gave to myself. So yeah, that the overwhelm can look like that. And I think that it's something that I haven't really heard so much from people, from entrepreneurs, but it's real. We all go through it, even in work, and especially work that we're doing for other people. We become very tired when we're doing work for other people that we don't want to be doing, right? But when it's your own work, it's kind of different. So that's the overwhelm piece. And the other components about the responsibility to the other people, right? About like making sure, or like having the desire for people to be reaching the messages that they need to reach. It's not really, it doesn't push me so much. Like all of what I'm saying is not like grabbing my throat and making me feel like I'm like melting, but it's there because I want to make sure as much as I can, that people receive the messages that they're supposed to receive, or that, you know, they have access to the opportunities that they're meant to have access to, especially if it's something that I'm hosting, you know. But over this past month and a half, as I've been in Mexico and just been kind of opening my mind and heart more, I know that everything is happening at the right time. And like the people who I'm meeting, who are engaging with me and in the work that I do, it's all happening at the right time. The right people are there when they're supposed to be there. Now, when I go onto social media, my brain is frazzled because there's a lot going on. There's like way too much going on, and I get overwhelmed in a different way immediately from that. And that kind of skews my perspective in terms of the divine timing of everything. Even your message coming to me was divine timing. I see that. So yeah, I guess that part of having responsibility to other people is there. That's the whole reason why I created it. This is not work that I'm doing just for me. The digital anthology, wellspringworks.love, it's like completely other people. Yeah, I have a few pieces on there, but it's completely other people. And then the podcast I have, I'm bringing other people on it all the time, you know, and the workshops are with other people. So nothing I'm doing is just about myself. So I guess that responsibility piece is kind of innate to the project.
Okay. So the responsibilities to other people then are part of those other people clients or not?
Some are clients, some are writers who I work with, some are podcast guests. And a lot of the times, because the work is so kind of cohesive within itself, people overlap. They become clients, and they also write for the publication, and sometimes they're guests on the podcast. It just depends on what the need is for the moment.
Okay. So in that case, so when they're clients, you're coaching them on what we discussed at the beginning, right? Like using the modality of writing to explore some aspect of who they are, correct?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
When I'm coaching writing clients for my writing coaching, it's based on their projects, what they're working on. So sometimes if somebody has this general need to express themselves, that's great. Create a curriculum and we work together for the appointed time. Sometimes it's like, I have a manuscript, I need editing services. Okay, editing services, got you. Or I have this application for something, I need to work through it, but I want to know what I'm doing wrong, or I want to know how to get better. So let's meet face to face, one time, two times, however many times you need, so I can show you how I'm working, how I'm doing developmental editing on your work, so you can see the mechanism. Because I mean, I guess it's just my training as an educator, having worked in schools and in universities. It's always about helping other people rather than me keeping all of the skills, you know, to myself, and having somebody pay for that, and then giving them the product at the end, which can be done. It's fine. It's totally fine. But my personal philosophy is like, let me show you how to do it.
Got it. Okay. So then a lot of your responsibility comes from teaching the specifics of what those individuals need
If they want it. Some people don't want it. Some people are like, nah, like, I'm coming to you because you can do it. And for those who want it, then here we are.
Okay. So then out of your clients, it's almost like it sounds like you have two different services, right? So like one is the actual technical writing help
Yeah,
or guidance.
right.
The other one's the teaching.
Somewhat. Yeah.
Okay. And they kind of sometimes overlap if
Yeah.
the individual wants it.
Yeah, right. So let me give you an example. So there was a writer who I was working with, and she was writing sort of like a memoir type book, but we were working on her intro for a while because I was explaining to her the reasons why I wanted to change certain things. And that's also my approach to help people feel comfortable with their own expression and not feel like that's wrong, don't do that, because our society already always tells us that's wrong, don't do that, change it, change this, change that, without telling us why, or like giving us options, or allowing us to make decisions for ourselves and say, okay, I know that's wrong, quote unquote, but I'm going to do it anyway. So that's kind of where the teaching guiding component comes in. And I'm like, if you don't mind, if you want, I can explain why I want to make this change. And then they usually say yes, because it's something new. It's like, yeah, why not? Why not get that?
Do they ask for that?
Do they ask for
For
explanation of why?
your explanation, your why you're coaching?
Sometimes, but that usually comes from a place of like of resistance. It's just a bit of resistance, like, I don't know why do I have to change it,
So
and then I explain.
what when you initially started working together, what did they want your help with?
the whole book, the whole manuscript. But at the time that we started working together, they didn't have the intro yet. So when we actually met, so I did like the editing services for the manuscripts, but then towards the end, they still had some questions. And I was like, okay, let's get on a call about this. Let's actually make this a professional conversation and not just like through emails back and forth, because I've done that in the past. And that always ends up putting me like making me do so much work without the financial gain, which I don't feel comfortable saying that, but that's part of the way that this world works, that this society works. So yeah, let's make it a professional conversation. In that case, we worked together on the intro, which they had at that point. And for the work that I'm producing, I don't feel comfortable putting out an entire manuscript sans intro and outro, if you want to call it, that looks like, you know, cohesive, good, whatever you want to say. And then the intro is something completely different. It needs to be, if I'm going to put my hand on your work, it needs to be everywhere so it can be consistent.
Got it. Okay. So that was the original, like, say, project
Mm-hmm.
that you got hired on to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then where did the coaching piece come into play?
That was towards the end. Whenever we met, like how we're meeting now, because they were in California, I was in Abu Dhabi, I think. So whenever we met, that's when the coaching piece came in. And like, yes, when I would like write back to them on email, there was some stuff here and there a little bit, but it was only when we met that I really went in on the coaching. When it was like, here's the editing work that I want you, that's not what I would consider coaching, because it was really just this is what I need you to do. I do it and I deliver it.
Got it. Okay. So
Yeah.
the reason why I'm asking these questions is what I was trying to get clarity on, and what's coming out for me, and again, you can always tell me how it resonates with you, is there's this element of individuals hire me to do one particular job. You have very strong narratives and very strong beliefs, and like just a very strong will to ensure that, you know, you're delivering everything that you could possibly deliver, which I think is a great thing. And intermixed within that are also some narratives with regards to, like, okay, like society always tells us certain things about how certain things ought to be. So I want to know, you know, I want to question those. I want to know why. So then potentially other people want to as well, right? There was the sentiments with regards to like money. There was sentiments with regards to I got to over deliver. And when I asked you, okay, like how many people actually hire you to coach them? It was like, well, some do, many just do like project and then intermix, you know, they're not really asking, but I'm kind of prompting to coach them, etc. So there almost seems to me there's this like split energy of I'm trying to give people things that they might not even be asking for. So is there an element of my own projection there? And even if there isn't, then if I'm currently overwhelmed and I'm currently feeling like I'm over responsible to a lot of people, how do all of these narratives affect that? Because right now I feel like I don't have the bandwidth to handle the work that I have to do. And yet when it comes to deliverables, I'm like adding deliverables to what's already there. Sometimes to help, sometimes maybe it's a little excessive, sometimes maybe it's not. I'm curious how all of that lands for you.
Interesting interpretation. I think as a whole, like as holistically, the whole picture of how I work is probably like that a little bit. I have a very, very high work ethic. And so sometimes it can be like that, but generally day to day, especially in the last several months, it's not like that. It's not an accurate picture of how it works, like the over delivering. I don't believe I over deliver. Not, I used to over deliver when it came to working for like institutions or corporations, because I just felt like I needed to in order to, anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But when it comes to the people who I work with, my regular delivery is usually an over delivery because of my work ethic. So I don't put too much effort into trying to over deliver to prove something to somebody at that point. And I know it kind of contradicts the thoughts that I had earlier, but I'm a human being. Like these things contradict each other. I'm not going to have a straight up answer, like a straight up consistent view of my life at any given point. I think because of the journey that I've decided to take, which is to embrace everything. And sometimes in that same moment, I feel like this is my work that I was meant to do. And at the same time, are people getting what they need? And those two, they coexist, and that's totally fine. But there's definitely some elements of truth to what you're saying, and then some of them are just an interpretation, which is okay as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the interpretation also going to come from, I actually don't have a lot of direct experience working like with people that coach writing, right? So like I'm kind of making
Yeah.
that part up as I go along. I'm trying to understand the dynamics of like that piece. So 100% where you see BS, call the BS on my end. I have zero issues with that.
Okay.
For me, it was more about, the results I'm getting in my life right now, many of them stem from overwhelm. One of the things that seems to be holding me back is just the bandwidth needed to move towards the goals that I have, okay, inclusive of the actual beliefs that I feel like I have to get there, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, when prompted, the games I seem to be playing reinforce more of the status quo than the movement away from it, right? Because more often than not, people are overwhelmed not because of the things that they're doing, but by the things that they're not doing, right? So what I mean by
Can you
that,
explain that, please?
yeah. So when we're overwhelmed, we're usually in loops of thinking about all of the things that still need to be done,
I
but that
see.
aren't
Yeah.
actually getting done,
Yeah.
right? And then, okay, so you're in overwhelmed, that's fine. That is the real feeling that you're experiencing. The result of that overwhelm is I don't have the capacity, so I'm tired. I don't have the energy sometimes to put out my podcast, and I'm traveling, and there's all these other circumstantial aspects to what I'm doing. So when we prompt further, then it's like, okay, well, if I could deliver and get paid and all parties are happy with, just for the sake of example, right, like 10 units of work, but I'm trying to add 13, and then I have all these looping thoughts of, I don't know if I can even do this, then it's like, okay, are my current narratives serving me or are they not? And if these are the thoughts that are giving me the results that I want, then am I working to change those thoughts, or do I not have the awareness to change those thoughts? So that's kind of what's coming up for me as you share that piece.
Cool.
And how does that land for you? Like, you feel like that some of it's accurate, some of it's not?
I think that it is accurate in many ways, holistically, as I mentioned, like in a given day, no, because so many different things happen in a given day, and it's not like I'm doing everything every day, But I think holistically, it's kind of like that, and it takes perspective to understand like how your thoughts might be influencing your outcomes. And I know inherently our thoughts influence our outcomes, but it's like I wanted to say negative thoughts, but it's not negative as the quality of thoughts, it's the absence of doing something, those thoughts. So in that case, like a negative, the absence of it. So the overwhelm that comes sometimes in thinking like, oh, I need to do this. Oh man, I have to get back to those people. And because I think for me, I get a lot of opportunities without seeking them that I don't want to say yes to everything because not everything is for me, but in those ones that I really do want to say yes to, sometimes the timing is just like, damn, like I just, yeah. But I do it, right? I do it because it always ends up being a useful, fruitful opportunity for me and the people or person that I'm working with. But I think those moments of overwhelm, I think it just kind of needs to be rephrased and re-looked at. So today, this morning, when I had those moments, I was just like, what is necessary for me to do today? Nothing. So I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to be okay with that because it's not necessary for me to do it. And I think it comes down to what you mentioned about the narratives. Like if I'm creating this narrative that I have to have this to-do list, which I do have here, just helps me keep things organized. But in some respects, it can also function as perpetuating the status quo, as you said. So that was a good perspective to hear from your end. Thank you.
Awesome. And again, as I said before, I think you have very good self-awareness, right? Because like I'll share one thing and then you'll take it on a tangent in like 10 different ways and see
I do.
yourself in that way. So I can see why you do the work that you do. Because I
Yeah.
think that level of being able to like look at one thing from 10 different angles is so necessary in the work that you do. So
Mm.
kudos on that piece. And I think just the last part that I will add to that is what you just described with regards, okay, like I can see where the pieces of overwhelm are. I have a just to-do list, but I woke up today, I don't have to do any of it. To me, that's a narrative of, what I do tends to be in part dictated by what's necessary, right? Like if the deadline is there, then I do it. Okay, that's a perfect way to continue to get into overwhelm. Why? Because, when I do it, it will be when it's necessary, not when I myself dictate, okay, I'm clear on what it is that I want. And then as far as focus is concerned, the way that, I define focus in the 10K norm program and the people that I work with, like focus is the evidence of active decisions towards your passive commitments. And what that means is
Mm.
when we take a step back and we look at, okay, what is it that I want and why do I want? And we've done that with enough repetition to really get through the BS narratives and get to the core essence of what we want. Okay, that essence becomes the dictator of what I need to be collecting evidence on moment to moment.
Mm.
So even just without a business example, but let's just take weight loss. Like I want to lose X amount of pounds. That is never going to happen unless I collect active decisions, active evidence of the little decisions I've made that coincide with that. But without the clarity piece, then everything becomes important, right? So same thing with regards to work. If I don't have the clarity on exactly where I'm going and why I'm going, right, then a lot of projects seem really cool. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But if I do have the clarity, sometimes that also means saying no to a cool project, but that doesn't coincide with like who I am, right? And now I know that's a deeper discussion with regards to like clarity and things like that, but just curious in the context of our conversation, how that lands.
Yeah, I mean, clarity is something that I am kind of like pushing through the fog these days because I'm just trying to find clarity. It's true. And I think that, well, I know that the way that I work and the way that I live is very, 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 very intuitive. There is this on, this surface version of me that is quite active, quite masculine energy in terms of doing, acting. I'm not a procrastinator. And so those times where I'm like, I don't have to do anything on my list it's not very infrequent. It's not frequent, let's say, but sometimes I need to do that because I just need to. And that's like the more intuitive part of me that says just flow with it, Kem. Like you don't need to push, because I spend so much freaking time pushing and trying to make things happen and having deadlines and goals and this and that. And though they were effective, they really were effective, but they were effective for a certain kind of lifestyle. And the lifestyle that I'm living right now is not the one that I was living before. So I take what you're saying and I totally respect you. Obviously know how to see into situations and read between the lines. So I admire that. And there are elements of what you're saying that I'm like, dang, I didn't even see it from that way. But it's good to see it from that way. But I also know there's also this kind of reinforcement with who I am right now in my life, which may change, and I'm in a total state of flow. So while I want to adhere to my list or continue to show myself those that evidence of like what I'm doing to lead to this thing, and if this is always leading to that, then I know I'm going to get that, and if it's always leading to that kind of thing, sometimes I'm almost like forced by some other force to stop and just to flow and be in the present moment of the day or with the people I am with, or like in the project I'm doing, whether it's reading or writing or playing guitar or whatever it is, and not focus so much on the work. But astrologically, my son, I don't know if you know, if you're into astrology much or if you know much about it, but my son is in the sixth house, which is in the house of work, and the house, basically the house of work, or what you're doing for the world, or your impact on people, or how you're showing up, right? And so ever since I was young, I've always kind of felt really comfortable attaching myself to what I'm doing with other people or the work that I was doing, right? Like when I was working at Pinkberry, yeah, I'm working at Pinkberry. That's my job. That's what I'm yogurt girl, you know? And then when I was working in the fashion industry, and then now with what I'm doing and with education, it feels like it's part of my identity because my son is in that house, and as well as other elements. So it's really a strong part of who I am. And so separating that and recognizing that it's not always about like the production and making sure, I know I've used that phrase a lot, but it's not always about that. Sometimes I just have to flow. Reconciling those two things is another constant tension that I face, which sometimes means there's a lot of overwhelm with the things I have to do, which for me, and maybe anyone else who ends up listening to this and who's into astrology, I have a Leo sun. That's that work, that drive, that force, that masculine energy that really dominates my personality. But I have a Pisces ascendant, which means that it's all about flow. And that's like the why, the core of me and what people are going to see when they interact with me. And Pisces is all about flow. It's all about water. It's all about intuition. It's all about emotions and just taking things easy. It's all about helping people and being a container for people. So those two things are those things are opposite. Those things are opposite. So it's always that constant tension. Full stop. I'm thankful for your perspective.
All good, even on the swearing part.
Okay.
As well. So by all means, if that's what's authentically coming up, feel free to express it.
Cool.
So lastly, I would just want to bring to that, because this actually does come up a lot in my own coaching with the clients I do have that go through 10K norm. When we talk about focus, because I work with so many heart-centered entrepreneurs, that does oftentimes come up, whether they identify as more like being in the feminine flow or they're more like the masculine doing. I think what you said is key, which is the reconciliation between the two. Because so many times I think that the narrative that holds people back is the black and white aspect. I either have to be in flow or I either have to be in this like dominant masculine, which so many of us tend to first do, and they lead us to burnout. So like, no, I don't want any of that crap anymore. I want to err on the opposite side. So if you're looking at it from that same perspective of, focus is the collection of active decisions towards what I want, what oftentimes come up with clients that do tend to have, because, and what I hear from you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here as well, it's like, if I'm using my intuition and that flow to give me my North Star, then that masculine aspect just takes care of the work to get there. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. So in that case, what I would say, your focus and the collecting of your active decisions is about, am I doing with evidence the regular things that are going to nurture my flow? Right? So that's going to look much different for everybody, right? Whether that's, I take time in nature, I take baths, I do music, I like art, I don't know what that part is for you. But it's like, if I'm overwhelmed, then that Zen quote about meditation always comes to mind, where it's like, the Zen master's like, hey, you should meditate. And people usually respond with, oh my God, I don't even have 20 minutes in my day. How could I possibly meditate? Oh, that's cool. You probably need 2 hours then. Right? Because it's like, if I'm so caught up in the narratives, I'm so caught up in the thoughts,
I
actually neglect to create the space for the piece that's going to give me the next step to get out of the overwhelm. Or the reality is, the 1 to 2 things that, when done consistently and go right, end up getting you the thing that you want anyway. Right? So in your instance, I would say the focus then is less about the task and productivity management. It's about, can I look back through my week and see where did I nurture my flow? Right?
I like that.
All of that land for you.
I like that a lot. I wrote it down. I think it's really great, a great way to think about it. And visually, I'm learning like a visual person. Like, I think I learn in all different types of ways, but the way that things really stick to me is visual, which is probably why, one of the reasons why I'm a writer, and a storyteller. So yeah, the doing is aiding the flow and the North Star, all those aspects of it. Yeah, it resonates with me strongly. I like it. I think that it would be a good exercise for me to look back through my weeks and see. Sometimes I do that though. I'm not like consciously or intentionally, but I just happen to look at my months and my calendar on Google, and I'm like, dang, I did a lot. Or like, I met with a lot of people. Wow, that work got done, So I think it would be a good exercise to do that, even if just to tell myself you're doing something, Kem. Like this is not all for nothing. Don't worry about, and I guess maybe these thoughts are also coming up because I'm traveling over the weekend to a wedding. So it's going to be a lot of family. And I just made this transition in my life. People are going to ask me what I'm doing and what I'm, all these things. And I'm preparing sort of to kind of, I, I don't know. Am I going to answer them? Am I going to steel myself against it? Am I just going to reinforce who I am? It's a completely new space for me, moving out of the life where I was like, just kind of in the, what is it called? Like that, the hamster and the hamster wheel. Yeah. To doing my own thing and kind of like roaming. And so I think a lot of these things are coming up now, but it's super, super helpful to understand that and to see from your perspective that my issue, if there's something like that, is not with the task management and doing the work, because it's getting done. And if someone were to look at the portfolio of work that I create, it's hard to believe that one person is doing all of this and consistently and at a high quality. But it's really with the thoughts that come in between the work that I have to do that I really need to like be more present with, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I couldn't have said it better, because that's exactly the key, right? Even when I look at the clients that I work with, it's in that moment, right? It's in the moment, because nobody that like people that want a 10K norm, like ambition is not what they lack, or like drive or vision, right?
Yeah.
It's well, why isn't that getting done? That is the better question, right?
Yeah.
Even better question than what marketing tactics should I do? Because that's again dependent on the clarity of who I am, what do I want, what's authentically me. So if writing is your thing, I'm not going to be like, you should just do video, right?
Mm,
Why? When you're going to be giving up your biggest gift. So one of the things like with 10K norm, and the reason why it's marketing agnostic, right? Like my thing isn't to tell you you need to do it this way because I did it this way. It's
mm-hmm.
what are the core marketing principles that get you to matter to the people that need you most? But then more importantly, what do we do with those thoughts in between the thing that needs to get done and the thing that isn't getting done? Right?
Right.
You said it's not the implementation. When I need to do something, that is the problem. It's when I don't need to do something. Why is there resistance in this space? What are the
Mm,
narratives that are talking there? What am I not owning? What am I not looking at? What am I not even creating the space to look at? That's where, the outside perspective, your own discipline or intention to look at those things is going to be the thing that is going to be a big facilitator in moving you forward. So yeah, 100%, I agree with that sentiment. So
mm.
does that part also make sense as we kind of begin to wrap up?
Yeah, it does make sense. And it's causing me to take a deeper look at my oh my God. And I'm always doing these deep looks at myself, hence all of the looking at things from different angles. And I know that I also overwhelm myself with the desire to do multiple things and say, I'm going to join this program and I'm going to do this. And I'll be on a Monday setting up my week to meet with people and to do all these things. And then Tuesday comes and I'm like, I don't want to meet with anybody. I just want to stay home. But I already do those things. So even in just like my personal life or when it comes to business, there are things that I put on the calendar, or even especially creating time for myself. But I think that it needs a what is it called, a reconfiguration, because something is getting crossed. I think there are way too many things, and I just need to drop some stuff so I can really focus my energy and get clear on I wrote these down. Who am I? What do I want? And what is authentically me? I'm going to keep these questions in my mind this week without going like, this is who I am, this is what I want, this is the clarity, because clarity doesn't come like that. If it did, then we wouldn't have a need for searching for clarity, right? Or for trying to find it. I'm just going to let these answers sit, or these questions sit and percolate as I try to come to an understanding, because I think what you're saying, as it resonates with me, that's where my focus needs to be. What are these things? That's the big why that I should be holding up. And I think other things will probably fall into place a little bit more easily, thanks to your wise insight.
Well, what I'm really good at is just helping you look where you need to look, right? So I would
Right.
actually argue that they're your insights. I just facilitating you looking where you need to look.
Yeah.
And there's, okay, because you brought it up now, so I just want to throw one other piece in there, which actually wrote about this in a newsletter that's going to be coming out soon. But this idea that helped me quite a bit that I learned from a mentor of mine called Nick Peterson, where he talks about the idea of the three C's. And the three C's stand for clarity, certainty, and collapsing time. And our brains by default, so let's not even worry about the narratives in the marketplace, which, as you identified at the beginning, not all, most marketing messages are about collapsing time. So make six figures in 6 months, or about certainty, join this program, follow these steps, and you're guaranteed to succeed. Okay. Those are narratives we hear outward, but the reason why they work to, get people hooked in is because our primal self, our hardwiring always goes first. Okay. And it's rooted in scarcity and wanting certainty. So it'll either latch onto things that sound certain or latch onto more. I need to do more. I need to reach out to more people. I need to reach out to more, because more will mean I get to collapse time. Okay. So why bring this up and why it stirred from your conversation? Because like the questions that resonate with you and the ones that you wrote down were like, who am I? Why do I want what I want? What is it that I want? How can I tune into that? That is the clarity piece. And the reason why I harp on it, and I usually ask people, is because we don't spend the time to actually go there. Why? Because our primal self goes first. And the first thing it looks at is how do I collapse time and how do I ensure certainty? The irony is that without clarity, without knowing who it is that I truly am, what is it that I truly want, and why do I want it, and I don't revisit it on a regular basis because it does change with who I am, then everything can be certain, right? You mentioned, should I join this coaching program? Should I read this book? Should I watch, this YouTube video? All of those things prompt certainty, but without clarity, I have no anchor point. So then I end up doing things that I feel like I should be doing, getting burnt out, getting overwhelmed without having that anchor. So once you have certainty, then any step I take, no matter if it's big or small, towards that thing is actually the certainty that I seek. But the reason it's so hard is because we get into these loops because we're not clear on what we're at. So once I can prove to myself, gain the self-trust that I can consistently collect the evidence of the active decisions that are moving me closer to what I want, then and only then do I have the choice of collapsing time. So just to kind of give this more of a consistent thing, right? Like if I do want to have normalized 10K months, and because I know who I want to work with, I only reach out to this type of person. And after every 10 reach outs, I tend to get one client. Okay. So I actually have certainty now. Like all I need to do now is continue to reach out to these types of people. And I know that I can have 1 to 2 clients a month. Now I get to ask myself, okay, given who I am and what I want, does it make sense for me to collapse time? Like if I reach out to 20 people and I want, to get 2 clients out of that, then that will collapse time, but it's only rooted in what it is that I want.
Right.
So, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but this is something that comes up again and again. And without that clarity piece, whether gained by self or whether facilitated through somebody else looking in and guiding you towards it, all of the other steps afterwards, you can be lucky and get them right, but that's like the 1 in a million chance. But they don't matter, right? The answer is always it depends, based off of what it is that you want, who you want to work with, how much you want to work. That then determines all of the other aspects of it. So I know that was kind of on a tangent with regards to a bit you said, but how does it land for you?
No, it's good. It didn't feel tangential to me. Maybe because I'm always speaking in tangents. It felt familiar. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was right. Right. It was spot on. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I know we kind of went all over the place, and I think we're both kind of tangent people, so I get that. Does this feel complete for you, or is there anything still left outstanding?
I think there's always going to be some things, but right now it feels like there's a moment for me to move forward from, which is great.
Got it. Awesome. Well, in that case, we can close that part as is, and then the floor is yours. Tell people who it is that you work with, how they can contact you, all of that good stuff. You have, the floor is yours to do all that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for that coaching session. I mean, I'd never done a coaching session like that before. So I was like, how am I going to respond? I don't know. We'll see. And I think that it went pretty well. So thank you. Um, so I host Wellspring Words, which is an online platform for women of color to share their writing, their storytelling, basically reclaiming their own narratives about who they are in this world and what they want to share. And it doesn't necessarily need to be about the fact that they're a woman of color, but just knowing that this is your perspective and you're sharing that your real identity, however you want it to be, is getting across in the world. That's the digital anthology, wellspringwords.love. And then there's a podcast that kind of goes along with it, but also just goes along with different parts of life. It's Wellspring Words, the podcast, where we talk about writing, spirituality, and wellness. And these are kind of topics that are all encompassing, and that's purposeful because the guests that I bring on are coming from all different walks of life and are not just women of color. That's specifically for the publication, but I speak to people from all different walks of life on the podcast because the idea is to connect ourselves with this human experience and the embodied experience of understanding what it's like to move through the world and the kind of things we encounter and how we work through stuff. And writing is one of those components. So if you're interested in these topics or just like to hear people having conversations with each other, which I am one of those people, check out Wellspring Words, the podcast, on basically all streaming platforms. In terms of writing coaching, I mentioned it a bit during the coaching session here today, but I work with writers who are working on any type of project. So that means that if you're in a space of brainstorming because you want to write a book or you want to create a project, or even if you're working on curriculum because you're an educator or something like that, and you're looking for the right verbiage to go with what you're trying to convey, I can help with that. And also if you're writing poetry or you're actually working on a manuscript or you're looking to develop your personal expression, your expression skills through writing, I can help create a curriculum that is going to match what you need. I know it kind of sounds like I could do anything, but I have so much experience in different types of projects with different types of students or clients or people from different, just needing different things. And I try to make it about the individual first before the project. And so the project always comes out like really, really, really effective for the person working. Okay, so that's the writing coaching. And then the last bit is the writing workshops, which are, as I mentioned, usually intuitive writing and creative storytelling, where you as a participant would have a chance to understand a little bit more about yourself or just actually have the space and time to sit with other writers. You can set up, if it's online, you can set up a little set, like I have my incense today and a little bit of water or tea or something, and you just have this space and you come out feeling super rejuvenated. If you have writer's block, it's a perfect space for that. We go through a lot of different prompts, group exercises, individual exercises, and chance to kind of workshop your writing. So that's kind of one set of the workshops that I do. And then there are different themes or different kinds, like personal essay or poetry or what's the other, confessional writing, things like that. So it's all about words, all about writing for me.
Love it. Yeah, so definitely a breadth of possibilities there. And yeah, I'll include all of that in the show notes. So that'll be available to anybody that resonates with that. So thank you very much for doing that. That was it was a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm glad that some clarity came about for you as well.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
All right. That is that for today. And we'll see everybody on the next one.